Perhaps the most insightful person ever in understanding the nature of democracy and also how freedom developed and equality, especially in the United States, was actually a French aristocrat named Alexis de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville came to the United States in the 1830s, and in his reflections of democracy in America, he talked about the many good things that democracy brings, but he also talked about some of the negatives or some of the worries that he had for democratic society. One of the things that he worried about was what Tocqueville called soft despotism. He said that despotism in democratic societies would be different from old despotism. It would be milder or softer. It wouldn't tyrannize men as much as enervate and restrain them. He described soft despotism that you would have this multitude of men all kind of circling around, seeking after their own petty or banal or vulgar pleasures. And over this man would stand this immense protective state. He said that would kind of guide every single thing we do, regulate our industry, divide our inheritances, and he worried that it would actually turn us into sheep, following a shepherd, and that we would lose the sense of what it means to be free. He thought that democracy was going to tend toward this type of soft despotism. And so he saw three very important things that could stop the tide of soft despotism. Local politics, that is, because avoiding centralization in a big federal central state, you'd have local politics where people would be involved in what's happening in their communities. This is very important because it also stops individualism. It gets people out of themselves in thinking about what's happening in political life. So for Tocqueville, this stopped the type of hyper-individualism that he was worried about, that people would just be kind of focused on themselves and not thinking about others, and get them out and make them involved in the community. This was very important. The second thing is civil society, or what Tocqueville called intermediary institutions. These are private, voluntary institutions where people come together, like private charity or mutual aid societies. Now, when Tocqueville talked about civil society, he didn't mean non-governmental organizations or something that's basically an arm of the state. He meant private, voluntary organizations. So private universities and schools and Elks clubs and Kiwanis and the Rotary Club and mutual aid societies and men's and women's groups and a host of other these things. These are very important because, again, it gets people outside of themselves. It also creates social bonds and social networks, right? So that you don't just have this massive kind of leviathan bureaucratic state and then a little tiny individual. Instead, you have this network of social bonds. The third thing that Tocqueville said that was central to maintain liberty and to avoid soft despotism was religion. Tocqueville talked about the uniqueness of the American experience because in France, liberty and religion were opposed. In the United States, on the other hand, liberty and religion work together. And he wrote that freedom cannot be sustained without morality, and morality cannot be sustained without religion. That if people lose a fixed idea of God, if they lose a sense of religion, then their minds would become confused, they would not be able to answer the most important questions of life, and they would prepare the soul for slavery. Without religion, and without a strong, rich civil society and local politics, we start to descend into soft despotism. And of course, the danger is that soft despotism can become hard. But when we read Tocqueville, sometimes it's kind of theoretical. I think it's also encouraging and inspires hope. We can stem the tide of soft despotism. We can stem the tide of too much love of comfort. Don't look to the state to be the source of solidarity and the source of helping the poor. We have to look to ourselves, and especially for Christians, we are called to help the poor. And I think that this getting involved in civil society and in the communities in which we live has been a hallmark of Christianity.